Stop me if you heard this before. Ohio State looks good in a victory at Happy Valley and then has a series of relatively easy games on the way. We're joined now by Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade. And Kyle, it seems like it was just 2 years ago where you and I were in Happy Valley and we talked about how Ohio State's got a pretty much an easy path and what games could trip them up. And well, 2 years ago it was the trip to Purdue that tripped them up. There's no Purdue on the schedule right now, but again, we're looking at a relatively easy schedule ahead for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see anything tripping them up. A couple of years ago, they had weaknesses, and it wasn't a fine-tuned team like this year. I mean, they're not perfect in 2020, but they don't have a just complete paper tiger defense either. It would be just the absolute upset of the decade if they lose any of these games before Michigan. And then obviously, in light of what happened last week to Michigan, that doesn't look like that'll be too big of a challenge, but still obviously is the Michigan game. So it should be smooth sailing for Ohio State, but like Ryan Day talked about, they can't get complacent. He's not satisfied with how they look right now. And I mean, this is really kind of a great opportunity for guys to really get in the swing of things. They're probably not going to be tested. So just kind of get into complete midseason form and peak for Michigan, the Big Ten championship, and the playoff.
We knew Urban Meyer would often use his weekly press conferences to send a message to his team, and I thought we got a big dose of that Urban Meyer medicine earlier today with Ryan Day, where he very much was sending a message that we cannot be complacent. We are good, but we are not great. It seemed like he was talking directly to his team at many points during that Zoom session today.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, it really did feel like the media was the football team, and it's like, well, message doesn't need to be for us. But yeah, I mean, it was very much directed for the team. He really didn't mince words. I mean, he kind of came across as a guy who was not at all satisfied with what he saw at Penn State. And I don't blame him, quite frankly. I mean, Ohio State was in total control of that game. It should have been a total blowout. And if you tack on 2 more field goals, which they should have had, it obviously looks a lot worse than 38-25. But they had a real opportunity to make a great statement. I think they still made a pretty big one, especially the play of the offense and the continued ascent of Justin Fields to the top of the Heisman Trophy race. But it just wasn't that smooth, total control type of performance you would have wanted to see if you're a coach.
Interestingly, the polls, which I never put a whole lot of weight in those to begin with, but the polls really thought it was a dominant victory considering it was enough to kick Penn State completely out of the top 25 with the loss to Ohio State.
Yeah, and part of that was, I think, in relation of just being 0-2 and having lost to Indiana the previous week. It's a weird year for the polls. I mean, I don't think they're totally irrelevant. And I still think like the AP poll, it's a pretty significant kind of historical marker. So I still think it has meaning. But it's really weird looking at it right now. I mean, the top 3 kings are there, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, but you get down, you see Indiana 13, you see Coastal Carolina in there. It's pretty fascinating to see some of those names that are in there.
Cincinnati, a top 10 team. Are the Bearcats for real, or is it too early to tell?
Oh, they're 100% for real. I mean, they just waxed SMU and Memphis, who are fine teams. I mean, those are really good wins. You can only play the teams on your schedule. I know they're going to be penalized for not having a true marquee win. They were supposed to play at Nebraska this year. That would have been a really nice game for them. I'm sure they would have won. But I think they are absolutely in the college football playoff discussion now. You saw Oklahoma State lose last week. I don't think a Big 12 team is going to make the playoff at this point. The Pac-12, the chances of them going undefeated probably aren't great just because, I don't know. I just kind of think you got to give Cincinnati the benefit of the doubt and maybe put them in there.
Let's go back to Justin Fields for a moment. Many incredible stats for Justin Fields through 2 games. I think maybe the one that's getting a lot of attention, 7 touchdown passes, 7 incompletions on the season for Ohio State's Heisman Trophy favorite quarterback.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Mac Jones, according to the betting odds, is the favorite now. I think he's really good. I actually had this hot take a couple weeks ago. I think he's better than Tua. But anyway, I, I don't know. It's just odd that because he's not like a huge name, even though he's the Alabama quarterback. It's not like Mac Jones is getting a ton of publicity, and Justin Fields is, quite frankly, he's at Ohio State, and he's a known quantity, and everyone knew what he did last year. But yeah, I mean, his stats are unbelievable. They're only going to get better. I mean, I would be stunned if he struggled all of a sudden against some of these teams. Perhaps he gets complacent, but I really, at this point, expect him to win the Heisman Trophy. I don't see how Trevor Lawrence does it now, missing 2 games. And it's just wide open for Fields to take. He'll have another kind of marquee game against Michigan. He'll have the Big Ten championship game. So I really think, despite what Vegas says, that he's your favorite.
Before we get back to Ohio State, let's talk a little about what's happening with Clemson. Trevor Lawrence will not play this weekend against Notre Dame. A chance for the Fighting Irish to really get a signature victory, something they quite frankly have not done for quite some time. So basically, there will be an ACC title game, but the Clemson-Notre Dame game on Saturday, that's going to determine who the favorite is in that ACC title game, and very well could be almost an elimination game for the college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Clemson's got some leeway. If they lose and then run the table, I think they'll be in the playoff just because of the Lawrence factor. And everyone just knows what they are. They get the respect card from the past 4 or 5 years. But it's going to be an unbelievable game. I can't wait to watch it. I think Notre Dame probably wishes it was going to be a little colder on Saturday. You want those Southern teams to have to deal with the Midwest November weather, and they're going to get a pretty pleasant evening on Saturday. That said, I think it all comes down to Ian Book, honestly. I know everyone wants to talk about DJ Uwe. I can't even say it. I thought I had it. But anyway, everyone thinks it's going to come down to him. But I think Notre Dame's Ian Book is the guy you got to keep your eye on. I mean, this is a game that he could finally, get over that hump. He's been good, but not great. He's got the biggest stage now in the country to kind of do something. I think Brian Kelly and the Irish have to be aggressive from the get-go. Like, this is a game where you just want to get up. You want to kind of take control. You don't want to be kicking field goals. Don't play conservative. Just go right at Clemson and try to take it from them.
Last week in the Big Ten, the road teams were a perfect 5-0 in the Big Ten last week. The road teams did not lose a game last week in the Big Ten. And Ryan Day talked a little bit about how, that's been one of the topics of conversation. Is there a home field advantage? And certainly the logistics of traveling this year are much different, but the game itself isn't much different. And playing on the road is maybe not as difficult as it has been because of the lack of fans. But Ryan Day causing a little bit of a controversy earlier today when he talked about the decibel levels and maybe that 70 dB level is too high during the course of a normal game.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I mean, he's not going to get much sympathy from me on that, but it's definitely interesting. I mean, I have a story that's going to be in tomorrow's paper about the home field advantage subject. Right now, home field advantage or wins and losses based on where games are played became a stat in the NCAA in 1966, and right now, it would be about 14th or 15th if the season ended today on the ranking of home and road. I think it's like maybe 62.5% of home teams have won games this year. And it's clear, talking to coaches and broadcasters and other people in the sport, I mean, it's totally different. I mean, it's essentially like a spring game or a scrimmage. You're not flustered down there if you're the road team. You can easily get your signals in. The quarterback's not totally worried about, the center not hearing the snap. There's not going to be a bunch of false starts this year. But I was fascinated by Ryan Day saying almost the empty stadium and just the acoustics of it, that those decibel levels that they're allowed to play in the Big Ten made kind of a difference at Penn State and almost, I don't know, did impact Ohio State. But I still think coaches and players would obviously take the empty stadiums in terms of a degree of difficulty over a packed whiteout at Penn State.
You mentioned the 2018 Paper Tiger defense of Ohio State. Well, the architect of that defense, Greg Schiano, is now back at Rutgers, the head coach, and certainly that's going to be one of the storylines going into Saturday's game is Schiano coming back to Columbus. And on the surface, everybody is saying all the right things about how much Greg Schiano gave to Ohio State, how much he meant to Ryan Day. But let's face it, Ryan Day chose not to retain Greg Schiano when Ryan Day was given the head coaching job late in 2018 for the 2019 season. And I don't think that's a subtext, yet it is there for this game.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Schiano was just incredibly complimentary of Ryan Day the other day in his press conference. Said that he could see when Day got to Ohio State that he was definitely, a rising star and the real deal and had that it factor. Obviously, that's panned out pretty well. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a genuine, mutual respect there. I don't think there's any bad blood. Ryan Day not retaining Schiano, that's just kind of part of the job, I think. It's one of those tough decisions that the coaches have to make. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if any of that kind of comes out as the week goes on. But I definitely think there's a real respect there. And I think Rutgers, quite frankly, I mean, they've looked competent this year. Obviously, they beat Michigan State last week against Indiana. And I know it's weird to say Indiana, number 13 ranked team in the country, pretty good team this year. Rutgers, they weren't awful. So I expect Ohio State to still clobber them and win quite handily. But it's nice to see Schiano perhaps have them on the right track. They have so many Big Ten transfers on their team. Got some former Buckeyes out there. Brendan White had a good game against against Michigan State. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they continue to progress as the years go on.
Another one of those Big Ten transfers that's made an impact for Rutgers is due for the defensive lineman from Michigan who, well, as you touched on, Greg Schiano's kind of opened the doors and brought in some talent from other schools that are making an impact right away. That's one of those ways that veteran coaches can do a quick fix with a program is to bring in those guys who've been in other programs for a little while and just haven't worked out for whatever reason, and it's paying off right now for Rutgers.
For sure. I mean, first of all, you just get players who have played at programs that kind of know how to win and know what a winning culture is like. So I think from that standpoint, it helps. Schiano obviously knows what a winning culture is like. He's got a history winning at the school he's at now. But more importantly, I mean, it just on the field, you've got a baseline level of competence, really. And I think it'll be that way as long as Schiano's there. I mean, are they going to be what they were his first tenure, like they were in the Big East and, win 10 games? I don't really think that'll happen in the Big Ten East. It's just way too difficult. But can they go to bowl games and go 6-6 or 7-5? I absolutely 100% believe that.
Let me finish off with this. Talking about the Big Ten East, I think they're without a doubt the hottest seat coaching-wise is under Jim Harbaugh right now. But should the temperature under James Franklin be a little bit warm as well? Because he hasn't been able to beat Ohio State with the exception of a fluke blocked field goal back in 2016.
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison. Because their tenures aren't totally unlike each other or dissimilar. But I think you see what happens when you, A, do beat Ohio State, you, B, win other big games, and you, C, have won a Big Ten championship. So that's just, I mean, yeah, have they both had a lot of 10-win seasons or 9-win seasons? Yes, but all 10 and 9-game seasons are not created equally, I would say.
All right, thank you very much, Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade. Of course, you can read his articles both in the print edition and online. Thank you for joining us, Kyle.